Breaking news, Rockstars. iZotope and Native Instruments have just released Music Production Suite 6, which includes an impressive collection of their best plugins and modules for production, mixing, and mastering. Ozone 11 Advanced helps you create professional quality masters from your mixes. I use Ozone all the time for mastering, and it's so easy to make my mixes sound like a finished record. Nectar 4 Advanced will help you get an instant vocal sound for music, dialogue, or rap vocals, with everything you need from auto level and tuning to EQ, compression, de-essing, effects, and harmony all in one easy plugin. I'm using Nectar right now to mix this vocal. And Guitar Rig 7 Pro brings you a massive collection of classic-sounding guitar pedals, amps, and cabinets for instant, amazing guitar tones. Plus, there are many more great plugins included like RX and Neutron, and they all have the Smart Assistant built into it, so you can quickly get a great sound and then adjust it to your taste. Just go to iZotope.com and remember to use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off. This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, iZotope, Atom Audio, Lewitt, and Spectra 1964. In fact, you're hearing my voice right now on the Lewitt Pure Tube microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX110D mic pre and C610 complementer with iZotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes below. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
My goal as a guitar player is to play the simplest thing, to play the thing that is the most efficient, least movement, and most fluid and most open string sounding thing that you can do. Because the sound of acoustic guitar and open strings, once you take your finger fretting a note out of the equation, there's extra frequencies that are allowed to ring. The actual body of the guitar rings more.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs. Whether you're setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class full-size studio for professional mixing and mastering in stereo or immersive sound. Featuring the XART tweeter and custom DSP onboard processing, the A-series monitors will perfectly adapt to your studio. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for you with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding much closer to professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools, and the best part is that these mixing techniques work for you in any DAW, whether you're on Logic, Cubase, Studio One, Reaper, anything you can think of. If you're ready now to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw. Welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Todd Lombardo, an ACM Acoustic Session Guitar Player of the Year nominee, producer and songwriter, living right here in Nashville, Tennessee. Most notably known recently for his contributions to Kacey Musgraves' Golden Hour, he is also responsible for Canadian platinum productions, as well as numerous #1 country hits as a session player. I first met Todd when he brought the artist Mickey Cash over to the Toy Box studio for me to mix. I was struck by his great production ideas, arrangement decisions, and guitar playing. And years later, we also reconnected over at Craig Alvins East Nashville studio, which he occupies now. It also turned out that we were both interested in lots of weird stuff beyond music, like Wim Hof and cold exposure ice baths for good health. And ultimately, we became neighbors over here in East Nashville. More recently, I got to hear a new record that he recorded with his partner in life and music, Lera Lynn, that sounds totally amazing. So I'm psyched to learn more about what Todd is doing in the studio and get some great recording, production, guitar playing, and mixing tips for you Rockstars. So please welcome Todd Lombardo to Recording Studio Rockstars. Todd, dude. Are you ready to rock, man?
Oh, man, I'm so ready.
You know what? It's funny. Just before I did that, I was like, when I read the intro, that's where I really screw up on everything and I'll have to edit lots. And that was like the most perfect one I've done in a while. So
good.
Maybe it's just good to do these early in the morning. It's, what is it, like 9:30 in the morning right now?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, that's my time.
Of course, it'll be a different time when you listen, Rockstars, and it'll be later. So.
We're not really being rock stars doing this at 9 in the morning.
Well, that's not true, right? True rock stars get up at 6 and go straight to the radio station to do station IDs and perform the song, right?
That's true.
Is that part of your world still? I mean, I know you do a lot of touring. In fact, I was even looking on Lera's website and I was like, wow, there's you guys. I mean, this will come out later, but your plans are like taking you all over the world for shows and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically the only touring I do now is with her. And actually, for the first time, this tour coming up, I'm staying home.
Nice.
So I'll stay home with Leo and I'll work here in town. And she's taking a band. That's the only reason. In the past, we've toured as a duo and we're sort of like figuring it all out together. And this time around, she'll have a tour manager and her good friends to sort of like protect her and have fun with,
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, man. I've known you for a while. It's, as I was saying before, it's really fun to do interviews with people where, especially when I think I've kind of known them, but then as I prepare for it and do the interview, I learn a whole lot more about people, about yourself.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your background in music and just kind of give us the brief arc from, where are you from?
Right.
What were you interested in? I know you as a guitar player primarily, right. And there's some great videos of you, youthful Todd on YouTube too, which I found and put in playlists.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I'm from upstate New York. Born there in the year of 1983. And I started playing piano as a kid, about 4 or 5. My dad played piano and I wanted to be like him. And I had my little Casio keyboard and I even had a little MIDI recording setup with this really old laptop with like a 15-pound battery. And I would multi-track MIDI when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And,
a laptop that takes, back when it took 2 to carry a laptop.
Right. Like the laptop was 3 times, the battery was 3 times the size of the laptop. Yeah. But started there and started playing guitar as a teenager around 13 and when I moved to Florida. And in Florida, in North Florida, the North Florida folk community is sort of flourishing. And we moved to St. Augustine, Florida, and there's sort of like a big eclectic mix of people, little port town, you get all kinds there. And
I love St. Augustine.
That's
where my girlfriend's parents are. And it's what used to be Soraya. That's my daughter. Our favorite place to go visit for a day when we go down on spring break.
Oh yeah. It's my favorite place in Florida.
What is it? St. George Street?
Yeah. Played many a gig and busked on St. George Street, back when it was allowed. But yeah, learned about bluegrass music there and spent a lot of time trying to play bluegrass. And then moved to Nashville when I was 23 and I had already been recording in Pro Tools for about 5 or 6 years at that point. And then got here and started recording demos for songwriters and went on tour for a while and started doing sessions and kept writing and producing and here we are.
So when you moved to Nashville, did you already have doors open professionally for you for music stuff? Or was it like, I'm going to Nashville to do a thing. Where am I going to live? Am I, what coffee shop am I going to work in?
Right. I had a friend, Henry Murphy, rest in peace. He passed a couple years ago, and I'll come back to this later, but now I'm finishing some songs that he had started for his family, which is a really, really beautiful project. But Henry said, I just karmically ran into him in St. Augustine a couple times. One, in a guitar store I was working in, and he said, come do a gig with me. And then we lost touch, and a year later, we ran smack into each other in St. Augustine again. He said, come up to Nashville, stay at my house. And then some really interesting synchronicity happened. And he said, what do you think? And I was like, okay, I'm coming. I'm moving. And he's like, okay, rent this apartment. Sight unseen, I rented an apartment on Music Row. And my first job was setting up and breaking down for his band at the Tin Roof. And he would let me sit in.
Where's the Tin Roof? Is that on? Oh, that's the one on the new Music Row, right?
Yeah.
Old Music Row goes up the hill. New Music Row goes back down the hill towards.
Yeah, well, it's on Demumbrian. It's not on 17th or 18th. Yeah. So it's past the statues. But yeah, that was the first thing. And then June of 2006, after doing that for 2 months, I got the gig doing the radio tour with Taylor Swift, just playing acoustic guitar for her.
Oh, right on.
So that was my first gig. And sort of quickly lost that gig because I wanted to improvise too much. I wasn't one to learn the parts and play it, and so that ended fairly quickly.
Wow, that's
my only gig I've ever been fired from. But
wow, that's awesome! What a great claim to fame. Thanks, Taylor. So
she's doing pretty good.
Yeah. So that's fascinating. So was she already, high profile at that point too when you got that gig, or was she still sort of climbing her own?
Well, she was climbing her ladder in private jets,
right?
Initially,
yeah,
on her radio tour. So
that's funny. I think saying what you just said about getting a gig and playing, but wanting to improvise more. I think that's more common than we might imagine. So my version of that was joining an indie rock band. And I was so psyched to get hired to go out on the road and play bass, play guitar, do gigs, have tour, be in a van, stay in hotels instead of on a basement couch where you step into broken glass to go to the bathroom, that kind of stuff.
Sounds so fun.
Yeah. Actually, that was fun.
You like being barefoot. You like testing your feet.
That's
you did
true.
That
I
for
did like
many
being
years.
barefoot, although I wasn't barefoot then, but doing the gig version of touring, I quickly learned that, the artist I was playing with wasn't really interested in Lidge the creative, more just like Lidge the hired session guy to play the chords right in the right order,
right? Which
is fine. I mean, they had a thing to do, but my interest in going on the road was fueled by my memory of being on the road with my own band, where it was just fun, hanging out with friends, and you're writing in this van and
playing songs that you wrote.
The gig's over, and you're like, "Where's the after party? Whose house who's putting us up in their house tonight?" kind of thing,
right?
Whereas touring and professionally was okay, we're done opening for this cool band, in I don't know what, Fort Myers, Florida. We're not staying here tonight. No, we're hopping in the van. We're driving halfway to the next gig, and we stay in some crappy hotel on the side of the highway and just keep going. And I was this isn't as much fun. But so you wanted to improvise more. Do you think that was a reflection of your motivation to be a creative and be writing and be?
Yeah, I mean, I had been writing and producing for years.
Right, and you came from bluegrass. You're like, where's my solo?
Yeah. Well. Yeah, I mean,
I thought I was supposed to step up to the mic, Taylor, and bump you off to the side. You're supposed to step back. Come on, man.
Yeah. Well, that soloing thing, it's especially, I've never been one to learn someone else's solo. It's just the worst. I mean, I probably transcribed 3 Mark Knopfler licks in my whole life, and that's about it. Maybe a couple of Bill Frisell isms.
Awesome.
And the rest has been just me sort of like an amalgamation of everything else that I've ever listened to. And
that's funny that you bring up Mark Knopfler, because your interview is coming on the heels of Chuck Ainley's interview where he talked about the Mark Knopfler records.
Legendary.
Yeah.
Legendary. Yeah. I've really picked those records apart. And it's funny listening to Brothers in Arms over the years and how big it was for me when I was a teenager, and then listening now and being like, oh my gosh, I know that keyboard sound. And I know that those mics that they use on the drums, you know, like looking deeper into that and like, man, this record, I'm not so into the sounds on this record as much as maybe I used to be. Like, wow, it's very different. I mean, just recording now is so much more full range. But that was a weird time. It was an interesting time for recording, but it was unique. And you listen to like, you know, Money for Nothing, and it's like, okay, this was a unique thing that they were doing here, and they were pushing into those sounds at that time.
Hell yeah, those sounds were bold as shit.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
And Chuck was talking about that record too. He was talking about all those sounds. It was pretty fun, actually. We were talking about like, you know, the creation of that sort of epic intro to the song.
Yeah.
Which is pretty wild. And then he was sort of revealing the secret to Mark's guitar tone too.
Oh, wow.
Which was great, which involved...
Was it the off-axis microphone thing?
It was actually accidentally having a double of the track in the mix.
Oh, cool. That sounds more like it, because I remember somebody said, oh, the mic just went off axis. It fell down. I was like, it sounds different than that. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes it sound huge.
Yeah. You're like, man, all that time I spent trying to dial my Boss effects pedal in, my DS1 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, so it's funny that you bring that up too, the evolution of sounds and the full range quality of records. Joe Baldrige talked about that on this podcast, where he was talking about the digital synth world and what it's and recording in the computer and what it has opened up as far as just huge, rich tonal sounds.
Yeah.
That are so massive. I also feel like I listen to records these days, and I feel like there's more dark, moody sounds too. Almost like those have more of a chance of coming way up front to the front of the stage, the sound stage, you know, because of what happens in digital and noise floors and stuff. Yeah. Do you feel like that? Do you feel like, I mean, I think about like, you know, Billie Eilish records or whatever, just as like an immediate example on new sounds, and like how you can have these dark tones that are like somehow right in your face too.
Yeah, I think that's you know, a mix of the samples and also the plugins and the knowledge of mixing now and the control over the mid-range and not needing the high end, and just those high frequencies not being as much a part of it anymore, and being able to get loud enough and detailed enough, but still have all that low end and be quiet enough, and then in the mix feel, you know, forward.
Yeah.
It's obviously it's a lot more than that, but I definitely notice a lot more dark music now in the forefront, like, you know, in the mainstream.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, the Mickey Cash record we did, listening back to it was nice as we were both coming, it holds up pretty well on the playlist of all the stuff we've got. And Rockstars, of course, we have a playlist of Todd's music in the show notes, so please scroll down and go listen to all that. Maybe not right this sec, but soon as you're done listening to us. And you can hear all these records that he's done, great records, Golden Hour, Kacey Musgraves. Of course, we've had Daniel Tashin on the show. We've had Craig Alvin on the show. And who, am I forgetting anybody? Hopefully not. And that's an amazing. Oh yeah, and of course, Sean Everett has been on the show too. So been really fun to talk about making that record. Now, of course, your involvement with that one. I think the other day I was like, I knew you had done it, and I asked you something about it. And you're like, oh yeah, I played all the guitars, and then I was like, holy shit, man, you played all the guitars on that? That's such a awesome record.
Yeah.
Tell us about that experience.
It was an incredible experience, and whenever people ask me about it, I tell them about the first day of tracking and how I claimed that it would be album of the year on the first day.
Really?
First song. It's like, this is going to win album of the year. And I felt like that energy was in the air. And I mean, I'd worked with Ian a few times.
Ian Fitchick.
Yes, Ian Fitchick.
Yeah.
And
Ian, you still need to come on the podcast, man.
oh, he would be great. And I had thought, I had heard Kacey on an NPR show when I was driving somewhere, touring. And I thought, man, I really want to record with her. And that frequency went out there, and it's like we were all in the right place at the right time. She was in love. I was in love. You know, Daniel and Ian had been working with her, writing with her for over a year. And we got together, and Sheryl Crow, I guess we worked at Cheryl's studio.
Yeah.
And that was just so special. And we recorded there for a week, and the record started as demos. It's like it hadn't been approved as a record yet. And after a week, we had recorded 8 songs.
Do you ever feel like sometimes that's the secret, is you have to record and just fully not know that you're recording something that matters?
Like, don't make it
or
as
everything
important.
matters, in other words, you know?
Right. Like, it's way less precious when we're just going for it. And it was really guys in a room feeling. We would play the song 15 times, and we were actually all in the same room. And then I would replay when Kacey wasn't singing.
Okay.
So I had already played the song a bunch of times, and then I would go back and replay my part.
Howdy, rock stars. I've got a secret to tell you about how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of recording studio rock stars. My secret is using iZotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you are hearing RX breath control, declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, ozone multiband compression, neutron EQ, and limiting, all from iZotope. Go to iZotope.com/rockstars and use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off. So when you say guys in a room, how many people would be part of a tracking ensemble for a record like that?
It was just the 4 of us.
So Ian's playing drums,
Mm-hmm.
You're playing acoustic.
Yep.
Daniel's playing
electric.
He's
or
playing
bass.
vocoder. He's always playing vocoder, right?
He played a lot of bass on the track.
Okay, all right, great.
And a lot of electric guitar. And I played a lot of acoustic guitar, and then overdubbed electric or banjo.
That's cool. Daniel once complimented my bass playing on a gig I did, so it's good to know I got a compliment from the record of the year bass player. Okay, and so the last thing you said was you played banjo and what was the other one?
Some electric guitar and some slide.
Okay. All right. So you guys would track with this, and then was Kacey strumming or just focusing on singing and getting in the vibe?
She would strum some and sing some, and then she would replace her vocal later. I would replace her guitar. She did play some guitar, some acoustic on a couple of tracks. She ended up doing acoustic guitar. But that's like a second acoustic.
So as an ensemble, you guys could go for the vibe and the feel of a song, just like discover it in the studio.
Yeah. I mean, what was so great is the songs perfectly laid themselves out to be performed acoustic guitar, drums, bass, and electric, or acoustic guitar, drums, and bass. You know, they were just perfect for that.
Yeah.
And sonically, we all had the same idea going in, you know?
Yeah. And then as soon as the track is down, would you just immediately just like, let me roll another guitar in right away? Like before you can even you can even think about where's my phone, you know?
Yeah.
Is it that kind of vibe, or is that overthinking it? Like, is it easy to just sort of come back and redo the guitar?
I think what we would do is play the song a ton of times. Once they felt like, okay, we got drums, Maybe we have bass. Probably still do some editing later.
And who's there? Who's
Ian and Daniel.
And who's engineering?
Craig.
Melissa? Oh, Craig.
And
right. Of
Craig's
course.
right there
Craig,
in the room.
Sorry, Craig was.
Yeah, Craig was right there. We're all in the same room.
Craig's just been on the podcast so many times. I don't even think to mention Craig's on the podcast.
Yeah.
Of course, he's on the podcast.
Yeah. So we were just in the room, and then after that, like they would leave, and I would replay the acoustic, and then replay the second acoustic.
Yeah.
And then at that point, you know, maybe I would overdub an electric. They'd probably be downstairs having a snack or having a drink. And then we come back and think, oh yeah, maybe we'll overdub banjo on this too. And they would listen as I was tracking, and we would, you know, then we'd move on to another song.
So now a big part of that record and what I've picked up on listening to your music is there's you have a real appreciation for softness and guitar tone. Like I would describe you as a gentle, thoughtful guitar player, you know.
Oh, thank you.
Now that I know that about you. And specifically like listening to like Slow Burn too, and that strummy guitar that's so, it just like hypnotizes you, just lulls you right into the tune.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, how do you like to describe your guitar playing? What's different about the way you play it from other people? Like everything from like, what do you do with your hands and fingers and picks and things
right.
like that?
Well, my goal as a guitar player is to play the simplest thing, to play the thing that is efficient, the most efficient, least movement, and most fluid and most open strings sounding thing that you can do. Because the sound of acoustic guitar and open strings, once you take your finger fretting a note out of the equation, there's extra frequencies that are allowed to ring. The actual body of the guitar rings more. I use a lot of capos to use more open strings, and then I play very light. I play very dynamically and very light, and try to play very evenly. Probably because in recording you're trying to make the engineer happy and make sure it's easy to mix too. You know, you have that, because I have that brain also. I'm thinking, how dynamically am I playing? How much is the compressor grabbing this? How much low end is still being let through the preamp? How much low end can I use?
Do you you're listening in headphones, or would that tracking have been something like a no headphone tracking?
It was headphone tracking.
So you're listening for some of those things in the headphones, and then the sound coming back too.
Yeah, and I mean, really,
it's kind of nice that Craig tends to usually not fuck up a guitar sound. Huh?
He nailed that. You know, we used Cam 56 and multed it with a Coles 4038, and those together, he just had a mono sound that he like took those, summed them together. And that was the sound. And there
so how do you do that? What does that mean? So 2 mics on the acoustic.
Yeah, he used. Actually, I've never done that in Pro Tools. I always track 2 mics at once. Maybe because I want to leave that open to the engineer to decide later. But you can just send them. That's a question for somebody else. But I do know that he printed a mono track. He probably talked
about it, and I'm forgetting. But so do you remember the 2 mics being side by side?
They were side by side. They were right next to each other in phase. You know, he would.
Now, of course, the Coles is just like it's a black hole of magnetism.
They were probably sticking together. Yeah,
right?
they were probably.
Or maybe there's like a little maybe put a headband around one of them or something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what he did, but yeah, they were right next to each other, and that's how I record now.
So I remember learning that trick from Jim Scott when he was on the podcast, and he was talking about recording Tom Petty's guitars, and it was this double mic thing, and I'd never ever tried that before. And then I ended up doing a video on YouTube on our channel showing that as I learned it myself. But there's something really remarkable that happens when you use these, you know, different like opposites in mics, right? So like a small diaphragm that has all this brightness.
Right.
And then a Coles or like a dark, large diaphragm. But I haven't tried it with the Coles. That would be a good one.
The Coles on acoustic guitar is a beautiful sound, even by itself, and then like boosting the high end on the preamp, on the EQ. If you don't have too much noise issues.
Yeah,
that's
right.
a really nice sound too.
Talk a little bit about that. Is there a preamp that do you have a Coles that you use a bunch?
Yeah, I have a couple Coles. And I use one on my guitar, and I use one as a mono overhead.
And what mic pre do you like using with your Coles?
I mean, I often use my 1081 pair to record acoustic guitar, but I love the sound of my PM1000 also. I think it's a great sound.
What's the PM1000?
It's a Yamaha 16 channel.
Mixer. Right. It's like
console.
old school. It's your old school.
It's an old console.
Yeah, of course. You shared a studio with Craig Alvins, so of course you have like a 1970s old console in there or something.
Yeah,
cool.
He found it in Portland on Craigslist and was like, buy this. And I did in 2016 and then didn't really use it. I think I paid $2,500 for it, shipped, and then spent $2,500 this past year having it basically rebuilt, brand new power supply built, phantom power added to each channel, and the direct out's fixed, and now it's rocking. I've been using it to track.
So, not to put you on the spot about knowing all these old consoles, but if you're just going to explain to the Rockstars why you would go find an old board like that, I mean, it's not a Neve, but somebody might be like, what, a Yamaha? So what is it that about these old consoles like that make it worth going to get? I mean, maybe sonically.
People will use these words like it's there's more depth. The low end, the way that the preamp reacts to drums, for example, people will say, yeah, it really is a special sound, and it reminds them of Neve. The EQ points. The board was like designed basically as a copy of the Neve.
Oh, okay.
It's
a trip to think of Yamaha designing a board.
Yeah, well, they're good at everything, right?
Like, we just nailed that jet ski and that ski mobile. Let's go make a console.
And then a lawnmower. Right.
Everybody loves that little weird car we built that's like for a 2-seater,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a thing, and you can push it. And when you push the gain on this board, it breaks up really nicely in a really musical way, and it's fat, a really great low end, but like
fat with the pH.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely fat with the pH, and then the mid range and the high end's really interesting too. Craig told me what happens with the high end capacitor when you turn it up. I can't remember, but it sounded really good when you described it, and it made a lot of sense.
Now, did you explore that world without, the expert advice of I'll put air quotes, Craig's in your world? Like, in other words, did you try taking old funky stuff and using them for mic pre's and discover things?
No, I'm not that person. I'm more like slowly, when I have money, buying nicer stuff.
Yeah.
And then hoping that it stays working. And I want, my goal has been to simplify forever and have everything set up so I don't have to think about it. And I'm finally there.
That's so key. I mean, I'm doing that in bits and pieces here.
Yeah. I
still enjoy doing the studio where it's like it's zeroed out and I can make it whatever it needs to be for a session, for a band. But, when I look back in hindsight, it's like, okay, most bands really do just want a drum kit and a bass and maybe a couple of guitars and a vocal mic. And, so it's like having something really good for that is key. But the ability to create is like it's so critical to not have to put on your engineer hat for too long.
Oh, God, yeah. And I'm realizing, too, I've been working with Louis Remenap, who's a great engineer in his own right, and just a great dude. He worked at Sound Emporium for years and years, and he's so fast, and he's got such great ears. And to have him there, like I didn't realize how important it is to have an engineer when you're trying to make a record. Like, I thought I can do this myself.
Right.
But once he was there, it was like, oh, okay, I can't go back. you know? And it's like, it's not like I'm not using my ears too. I'll say like, that the kick drum, we wanted to have more of this or that, or there should be more body in this, just for the production, like where I'm hearing it. And I'm confident in myself in that, but having his knowledge of working with, 30 different producers and seeing and other engineers and seeing how they will set up drums. It's just like, oh gosh, it's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I think sometimes, it really is tempting to want to do everything. And I think it's cool to do everything. I think it's cool to explore that, right? Because,
Right.
We're recording studio Rockstars. A lot of the listeners are all have home studios and are doing everything.
Yeah.
And it's fun to learn how to do all this stuff. But the truth is, when I, play guitar on a session here, I actually just let go of the engineering. I'm just like, well, it's just going to be what it's going to be, because I just want to be out there playing guitar and focused on that.
Right.
And all it takes is a little bit of putting yourself in that session mind where you're like, my brain can't be interrupted right now.
I know. I do work remotely for people. They'll send me tracks, and I'll sometimes stack them up in a day and have someone help engineer, but sometimes I'll do it myself. And I have a process for that, with like where I sit and how I record.
It's funny that you said that, because it's like, it's the dumbest shit that really, really matters.
Oh yeah. And for years,
right?
You'll do it wrong. Like for years, I'll be really uncomfortable and not be relaxed when I'm recording the slightest bit, because of the way I'm leaning over to hit record or, to punch something in, and having all that stuff set up, really, it's just a process.
Hearing you say that about relax, I'm looking for my question about, yeah. So one of the records, I think this is true across a lot of the stuff you do, but one of the records in particular, Analog Heart, is like ambient hypnotic record, pulsing guitars, delays, got some violas and cellos and stuff in there.
Yeah.
And it's very mood oriented. And so my question regarding that is just like, what do we need to do to create the right studio mood and vibe for creating very moody records? So, which is along the lines of what you just said, being relaxed. Where do we screw this up and lose the magic of a record because of something that has nothing to do with like, it's got nothing to do with which mic and which mic pre we chose. It might have everything to do with whether we're comfortable while we're working and just in a state of mind.
The creative process, I think the most important part of the creative process in the studio is having a fluidity in your schedule, having consistency, being able to start at the same time for 3 or 4 days, things working, not having hiccups where you get, oh shit, the computer's not working now, or oh gosh, like now there's a noise. Being able to quickly resolve those things help with creativity and actually creating something. But
hopefully not having an espresso machine that shuts itself off in the middle of a podcast interview and makes all those weird noises in the background. We'll see if you hear. I always like to joke, we'll see if you hear it Rockstars on the final mix, because my mixing skills are excellent.
And you have much RX software. And speaking of noise, like I, for so many years, would worry when there would be any noise going on. And what you don't realize is in the mix, no one will ever hear any of that. Even if it's like sort of an intimate thing, like that will never come through the sound of that,
Right. Dealing with a lot of home studio situations and stuff too. You're probably getting like, you hear something like there's construction and outside somewhere and it's stressing you out.
The reverse beep does have its way of making itself known. And it's a pretty prevalent sound these days here in Nashville.
Yeah. Now, Roger Moutinho once said that somehow the train never destroys a record.
Right. That's so true.
It's like too musical or something.
Yeah. And, we live really close to the train. And your studio here, to you listeners, we're actually about we're one house. There's one house between our houses. So we basically have very similar lots.
Yeah.
On this hill.
Our dogs bark in unison.
Yes. So I thought, eventually I will build a space here, a garage with a studio maybe above it. And I'm not so concerned about the train, even though it comes pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Because in reality, you're not really recording that much of the time. You're recording, a tenth of the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like the actual mic rolling. I mean,
right.
It makes sense if you think about it. I mean, if you're going to spend days and the song's only 3.5 minutes, you're not actually in record the whole time.
Right. You're thinking a lot. You're banging your head against
song.
The wall for a long time.
Yeah. My studio is proudly powered by OWC, and I love how it's improved my workflow. OWC can connect all your audio work drives, trackballs, mix controllers, MIDI keyboards, audio interfaces, displays, or cameras so that you can work fast and focus on making your best record ever. Go look at the Mini Stack STX, Thunder Bay 4, or Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at maxsales.com/rockstars to find the perfect solution for your studio from OWC. Let's jump over and talk a little bit about Lera's records, because it's very cool to learn more about, to hear what you guys are doing, and then just sort of learn more about how you're coordinating in the studio for production. I don't know about the songwriting, but even, sometimes going out on tour together, sometimes not, because you're co-parenting as well and all those challenges.
Yeah.
So tell us about the newest record, Something More Than Love, which is super cool sounding. And I had the honor of having you guys come over and just like check your mixes on the Carl Tatz speakers here, which was really fun. I probably just stressed you out for it. Probably all it did was just keep your sense of stress elevated for another week until the decisions were done, right?
It's like, Yep, we're right. It's still not good. That's basically it. That we are confirmed. They are not sounding right. Okay.
That's awesome, man.
So that's the way that is. But isn't that the way? They
sound right now, though.
Yeah, they sound great.
Nailed it in the end. So
and after the mastering, they sounded better. That's an interesting too. Also, like the process. Conrad Snyder, who mixed the record, he used Lander to master. And I wasn't really sure that was happening when it happened. Or maybe I was, but I didn't realize how much dynamic compression that was happening during that. Like how much scooping of the low end and how much there's that parametric compression happening. There's a lot of legwork happening.
Is that what you guys decided to do for the final masters, or was that just for like mastering along the way for listening refs?
That's why it made it confusing, because really what would have been better would have been, just an L2 on the master, just make it loud. And then we'll be able to hear EQ. There won't be too much work being done beyond that. We got into a position when we went to mastering, they were like, oh, well, yeah, these don't sound... The mastering engineer's style was not that. He's like, I don't use any parallel compression.
In other words, you guys were doing a great job, but the additional Lander treatment of the mixes
that we were referencing,
which probably
for mix changes,
which probably Lander probably is set up to wisely master the shit out of whatever it's doing, because most people need a lot of that extra excitement in their mix.
And help in the low end, the taming of the low mids, the brightening of the track.
But in your case, it was causing you to then make decisions about the mix, which are you're going back to, like feedbacking to the beginning of the process.
Yeah.
And it comes back through that mastering again and throws you off a little more.
Yeah. Once we had Joe Laporta master it, who, he's like a Zen master. He's like, I don't use any parallel compression.
Is he a Zen master?
He's a Zen masterer.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a master of Zen mastering. So yeah, he's like, no, I don't use any parallel compression, just EQ and then limiting.
So the parallel compression basically just takes all the quiet stuff and brings it up even more in your face. Like, what was your
I'm
feeling
using the
about
word
it?
parallel compression, and I don't think that's actually parametric. Like
Maybe parametric.
parametric, yeah, where you can
It's
pick which EQs are compressed.
Yeah,
not parallel
parametric
compression.
easier.
My
Yeah.
bad, y'all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Multi-band compression.
multi-band
Yeah.
compression. He uses none of that. So and Lander is.
We got the term finally right, Rockstars. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for your help. Y'all are like,
You guys are great.
You got it wrong.
Yeah. So mastering's a funny thing. I do my share of it as well. Like you would imagine, I can, the DIY version of it. I've gotten better and better at it, but I'm always exploring all the different stuff you can do. And there's just so much you can do.
Yeah, there's so much software.
It's like you can just as easily mess up the mixes as you can get them to sound better.
Oh yeah. You can
so it gets challenging at times. But the multi-band compression, I always thought of it as a way, the thing I thought was helpful about it is it helped to tame harshness.
Oh yeah.
Because I had a lot of mixes that I had initially probably suffered more from like way too aggressive mid-range,
Right. High mids.
Needed that.
Yeah, it's great what that can do. I mean, I love using it on single channels. Like, man, we didn't use the right mic on this vocal, and it's really accentuating the high mids in her voice. And or she's singing at a certain rate that's like, it's wow, that's really pushing those high mid frequencies. That it can be really helpful to have that.
Have you been messing with the plugin Soothe?
You're the third person in 2 weeks that's mentioned that plugin.
You responded. You knew what I was going to say even before I got.
I knew what you were going to say. Yeah. So no, but I have to I'm going to get that, and it's going to help me mix this record.
It's a cool one. It does a lot of cool stuff. It's helpful, but just like all the tools we use, again, it's easy to overcook it.
Right.
Push it too far, and then next thing you know, but it's funny thinking about pushing things too far. What are the things that you push too far and you're like, oh my God, that was it. Like think about auto-tune, it came along and it wasn't really cool until people just pushed it too far and it became a new sound.
What's so interesting about pushing things too far in the process of making records is often when I'm producing and there is going to be a mixing engineer involved, I will just I'll never push it too far. I mean, I'll push maybe like the production side too far, like keep trying different guitar things, seeing what it rejects over and over again.
Voicings, capo positions.
Yeah, like the guitar sound, like, the guitar part, synths and so on. But there's a point where I'll just balance it. I'll balance the mix and then rely on the engineer to push things too far because they understand with distortion what things they can EQ, push the EQ on, and their new perspective will take it to a more aggressive place, give it more teeth.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a super, super valid and important thing.
Let's go there a little bit. So, two people you've mentioned mixing with, I'm sure you've worked with a lot of others, and of course, Craig Alvin, but like, Sean Everett, when he's mixing.
He's the master of that.
The Golden Hour.
Yeah.
Conrad Snyder, when you guys were mixing Lera's record.
Yeah.
Different, I'm sure that they all make different moves.
Yeah.
And before I ask you about like, what was some of the stuff they did, let's talk a little bit more about things you've learned about it. It doesn't matter who's doing the mixing and what they're capable of. There is still that process of how do I respond to the mix? How do I communicate what's good or bad about it? Make changes? It's tough to be a producer and it's tough to have a response to somebody who's mixing.
Right.
In the same way that it's tough to communicate with somebody you've hired as a session musician who's playing a part.
Communicating this weird language of music, and when to be technical,
right,
and when to realize you're being too technical and step back and say, nobody's gonna give a fuck about this EQ. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that this is a little bit louder or that the snare is a little bit louder in this moment, except for you. And it's actually not going to be better if you even this all out. The ability to leave imperfection and to have a filter that allows that is also reliant on the quality of music. The music has to be written to a certain quality for people not to say, well, this just sucks anyway. You know, right. You played it shitty and it sucks. So if the song's really great, you know, and you don't think about how the guitar was performed weird. You think, oh, well, you're just feeling this. This is a moment they captured, this great moment, and this is a great song, and there's so much emotion in this vocal. But to bring it back to the technical stuff, there's so many different ways to get what you want. And the way that producers communicate with the mixing engineer, there's a million different styles. The most important part, I think, is having a respect for each other, trusting each other, trusting the mixing engineer, trusting that, and I'm saying this from experience where I have really been uncomfortable in these situations where I've been like, oh God, what is that? So that's all wrong. That's not right. Oh man,
just not feeling it.
Yeah, just not feeling it.
And the worst is, well, and what if you totally like the person you're working with too?
Well, usually you do, and then it's like, wait a second, step back. It's not just you. You've been listening to these things this way for so long. This is a different perspective. He likes the way this sounds. He thinks this sounds good. He also thinks, or she thinks, everyone else will think this will sound good. And this is what it needs. Stop for a second and just sit in that. And then listen again with those ears. And then maybe you'll actually get to a better place. And the aggressiveness we were talking about, you can lose that. You can lose that edge that is necessary now if you don't sit with your discomfort in the way they sound different than the way they were when you handed them off. Because in the end of the day, like, you didn't give them to them for them to give you back the exact same thing.
Right. You don't get, you know, you're like, can you just do the rough mix again for me?
Yeah. Let's just use my rough mix and just put it through Lander.
But do you notice sometimes that something that was in the rough mix seems to go away with the new mix? And it's challenging because you make a great point. So when I think about like finding a keyboard sound in a cool, you know, digital synth or whatever, it's like, oh, this sound is so cool. But what about all those other sounds, you know? And that's like, who cares? If you didn't use them, it doesn't matter because nobody ever heard them.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, hearing you talk about the mix, it's like, but what about the rough mix? And then maybe it's like, oh, well, you know.
Rough mixes have been used on records countless times.
Yeah. Worked for John Lennon, right?
Right. It works for so many people, you know. They're like, oh, that was the rough mix. And I was just talking to people the other day, like, yeah, we did use the rough. But, you know, when you don't understand fully how to make mixes translate, your rough mix, the mix you give to the mix engineer, you know, the track when you give it to them might actually feel better. It might, to you, it'll probably have more dynamic in the low end and that feels good. Your body responds to that. You're like, fuck yeah, this feels warm. It's fucking rocking. It's hitting hard. But then you put it in your car and it's just like, it's like, damn, it doesn't feel as good in my car. So like that whole science and that technical side of it is something that happens. Yeah, I think most producers who are good at what they do are good at handing it off, and it feels good when they hand it off. But then the mixing engineer has to, like, you know, do all that work, keeping the warmth, keeping the low end dynamic, and deciding what's important in the mix. And it's still feeling fat and warm and having an emotional response.
Well, and I think about like that rough mix versus new mix thing. And it's like what you said about the mixers feeling it and they're going for what they think sounds cool. Hopefully, if they're not, then hopefully hopefully you picked up on that before you even got that far. And if they're really not, you probably never got the good feeling about working with that person in the first place, potentially. Right. So you would have avoided that. But if they are, and I'm, in reverse, if I'm mixing for somebody else, I'm trying to get a thing that I'm excited about.
Right.
Then it's like recognizing that this new version of the mix or the song might be just as legit. It might be just different, but also legit, just like the old version. And so it's that question of like, give it a minute, give it a chance, let it see how it feels. And
yeah, I mean, my experience with Conrad was these are so much better.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's mixed my records too in the past where that was my music. And I just like had worked on it so much and I was like, I'm never going to finish this. So I had to give it to someone else to finish. And he just took my Pro Tools sessions, just like with Something More Than Love, took the Pro Tools sessions, all my volume automation, and just went from there and started there. And obviously he would like, send stuff out to like this compressor or send it to this distortion or to this tape or to these outboard effects, and send it back in and do that. But it was definitely it was like seeing it in color after he was done with it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good experience to go through all that and just figure out how to,
you have to. I mean, that's
be
part
willing
of the
to
role.
take a risk on it.
Unless you get really lucky right in the beginning and you just meet your person and you're just like, oh, there's this symbiosis. And
right.
like, it's like, oh gosh, we got this thing. We trust each other. You make what I do better. I don't even have to think about it. I just know what to do and what to give you, and you're going to make it better.
Yeah.
And that's nice. But then sometimes you have, trial and error and you work with people. I've worked with so many mix engineers and they've all been different and they've all been great in their own ways. And I wish I could have this guy for this part of this record and this guy for this part of this record. And now I'm to the point where I'm like, I know some tricks. I don't have everybody's tricks. I don't have everybody's gear, but I think I can get the stuff sounding the way I want it. And hopefully I can push it hard enough to not be vanilla and have something to say.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about your experience mixing with Sean Everett.
So
I didn't
get to mix with him. I do remember Ian sending me the first draft of what he had done. And I was like, oh God, I don't know. It's so aggressive.
It was so different from where it was.
So different earlier, and it felt so dynamically different. The way he compressed the banjos and the way he like.
It was bold. It
bold. Was so bold. And
it's like bold and soft and warm all at the same time.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like Ian went to LA, spent a week with him, and they pulled it into this beautiful middle place. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's the magic. In that instance, that's a perfect example of pulling it too far and then using a lot of that to make it unique and fresh and aggressive in the right ways and keeping some of the initial warmth.
Yeah. It's good that you said too far. So I do think that's a lot of times part of the creative process, right? It's like you have to walk up to the edge of the cliff and recognize like what's one step too far where you're going to fall off the cliff. So you can take the one step back and now you're right on the edge of the cliff,
Right.
I don't know, maybe that's a weird analogy, but in creative stuff, what are some of the places where you feel like you see that happen where you're like, you got to go this far and then take 2 steps back and that's exactly the right place to be? Or is that not the way to do it?
No, I think you can never go wrong pushing something in the writing process to see where you can take it in the production process. If you have the luxury of time to push something and keep trying out different vibes and seeing, you know, where it can go. It's interesting, like too far. Yeah. Like, maybe we go too far. You can get lost. You can go on a tangent and go feel like you went way off and then end up back where you started. But taking the tangent is important to see if you get somewhere better.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Totally.
And that's what it means by maybe pushing too far and getting to the edge.
Yeah. Adam Audio introduces the all-new A-Series line of monitors, featuring the XART accelerated ribbon tweeter design, built-in DSP-based room correction, and speaker voicings, allowing you to customize your Adam Audio monitors to your control room. The A-Series will rock in any studio. Small studio spaces or immersive multi-speaker configurations are perfect for the A4V or the new A7V, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. Mid-sized rooms and narrow spaces will love the low-profile A44H, expanding on the A7V sound, or the A77H, a true three-way midfield monitor delivering rich, spacious sound. And bigger studios will love the A8H, a three-way speaker and the pinnacle of the A-Series that delivers extremely accurate sound required for critical listening environments. Get the Adam Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for your studio with an extended 5-year warranty at adamaudio.com. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session, a.k.a. the second half of the show. My guest today is Todd Lombardo, joining us here at the Toy Box Studio on Recording Studio Rockstars. Todd, you ready to jam, dude?
I'm so ready.
All right, sweet. All right, what is jamming for you, man? I mean, do you like, I know you play all sorts of different guitars. I definitely think of you as somebody who has a real appreciation for beautiful chiming chords. And you say you don't want to transcribe other people's solos, but do you like to are you just like, let me just keep playing the lead for 30 minutes?
Well, I've never been one to play long extended solos. You know, maybe when I was 20 years old in my band in St. Augustine, we would have extended jams and keep going. I was more about like writing sort of like compositions, not writing them out, but like writing songs and having a solo section in that song where you play over the form. And
should every song have a solo?
Of course not. There are no should everys in music.
Yeah.
But like certain songs should have a solo, right? We know that. It's interesting. I just heard the other day somebody was talking about watching a George Martin interview where they brought up "Here Comes the Sun" and they had the multi-track of it, and then they turned up a fader and it was a George Harrison solo. And he's like, I have no memory of this. And it sounded so cool. And they're like, it didn't make the cut though. So that fader went down in the final mix.
Fascinating. Yeah. It's back to that idea of like, no matter how great the other idea is, if it's not in the final version, you might as well just forget about it now because it won't matter. Or it'll matter when you do the box set and you release the alternate version later.
Right. And that brings me to another thing, like, you know, the feeling you have, the nostalgia of a process, that doesn't matter as much as how it sounds. And if it's a good performance and if it's the right part.
We attach a lot of our own personality, like our own personal experience to the thing we're making. And maybe a good takeaway is remembering that
nobody gives a fuck.
Well, but the experience, I mean, we do give a fuck because process matters, right? If you can't enjoy the process, what's the point of doing it?
Well, we give a fuck, but the listener's not going to know. The listener's not going to know.
And the reason that you're nostalgic about it is because you got to experience it and you already experienced it. So maybe that's like the good lesson to learn is just like experience it, enjoy it, be ready to let it go and move on to the next thing. And I'm trying to do more of that in my world now. I mean, even just like revamping the studio and letting an old console, the MCI move out of here and move on to other things. Remember. It's like, it's true about gear and studio. It's true about songwriting. It's true about the experience in a record.
Yeah.
But that's a cool way to think of it. It's like the things that we feel attached to as we near the end of the record, let go of them because like you're not detached from, you still got to experience it.
That's right.
Yeah. So with Kacey Musgraves, the next record, I didn't write down the title of it. So, Star-Crossed.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that. That's more recent than Golden Hour, right?
Yeah.
And it has a quality to it that reminds me of DJs.
Yeah. I mean, that record, the process for that record was a lot more of working from demos that were already made. We would sometimes use her vocals from the demos. A lot of the instruments from the demos we would use. It was written in more of a pop form where there was programmed drums that we were like using. And then where I sort of came in and added my self was Kacey's vision of what the record meant as a story. This sort of like star-crossed lovers and giving it an arc in that way.
What is a star-crossed lover? Is that a good thing or bad thing?
Destined, right? Destined for failure, basically.
Oh, for failure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
oh man.
Yeah, it's not going to end well. And so, yeah, it's a tragedy.
Awesome. And tragedies make the best plays, don't they?
They do. So yeah, that's what we were sort of starting with the classical guitar and how that played into the record. And
right, because you're not tracking as a band if it's very demo forward.
And that made it so much different. Like I almost never played with another musician the entire 3 weeks I spent with them making that.
But you guys are in the same studio together, or is it
and
like
they're
handing
listening.
off? Like,
I mean,
there's
definitely
back
like
to your place.
No. We did it all actually at Ronnie's place, which was really random. But Kacey transformed it, brought in a bunch of cool furniture and lights and flowers.
Talk about that. Is that kind of part of her super talent in the studio, is to just make a place vibed out and feel like a great place to work?
Yeah, I mean, vibe and the feeling and a theme is really important to Kacey, and that definitely helped. It helped most of the time, and then there was times when they were like actually doing a photo shoot, and that distracted from it a bit. And I think she was just being pulled in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, I mean, it's work.
Yeah.
Plus, you guys are on the heels of Album of the Year.
Yeah, and
this is the immediate next record, right?
Right, and we
talk about that. That like, does that present challenges?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the elephant in the room, and that's why I think she wanted to make something very different, and it was, and I think it was a good answer. She was going through a divorce at that time, and Ian was going through a divorce at that time. I had a new baby at that time. Daniel was going through his own shit. It was a much different vibe, right? And it was a grind a little bit more in that sense. Like it didn't have this sort of like immediate, not to say that they didn't grind a ton on Golden Hour to finish it.
Yeah.
Which is like finishing is the deal. But yeah, this one was sort of a lot more like, we like the demos. How do we take them to the next step? And we still like them. But I think the Star-Crossed theme really helped. And we did that version of Gracias a la Vida at the end. And that was a performance. That was like me and her playing. And then Sean took it and transformed it into like all these different.
Is that working with Sean Everett again?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
And
yet the record is so different from, like sonically, they're just very different records, which is fascinating to me. And it's fascinating to just think about like these different thematically what goes into a record, and then just the process, and the sounds, and it all just things are just, they have their unique personality to them.
Yeah, I mean, we can all take lessons from Sean and his desire.
We do. Whenever he agrees to do a podcast with us, we just take we're all taking notes.
We're all taking a lot of lessons. I mean, like from like melodyning percussion to like,
What's a melodyne percussion example?
Congas, putting them in key.
Oh, fascinating.
Taking the notes, and like actually, okay, yeah, we're going to make it these notes.
Now that's easier to do with the ACA built-in Melodyne for Pro Tools anyway.
Oh, it's built in now?
Yeah, so you just double click it and say open it in Melodyne, and boom, there it is right in your Pro Tools session.
I should probably update my Pro Tools.
Rockstars, update your whatever needs to be updated.
Oh gosh, it's scary though, isn't it?
Don't rush into it.
Isn't it scary?
I just have accepted that I'm constantly in a state of update, and that's just okay. It's like
there's two different kinds of people. People who are always updating, people who are never updating.
Yeah. It's a lesson I learned from parenting, which I think you could probably appreciate.
Yeah.
Is parenting has taught me that you are constantly in a state of change, and it's okay.
It's true.
And so like, I just, instead of stressing over things, I'm just like, okay, cool. I know I just spent weeks getting this ready, and now we're about to move on and put it away, but okay. It's like, so, if I can adopt that in the studio too, it's like, all right, cool. I just set up the entire thing, and now I got to do something different. All right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, letting go of a project, feeling as though it's good enough to stop. It's something that we all need help with. I need tips. Somebody leave comments on how to stop.
You mean like, let it go, that kind of letting go.
A song I wish I'd written.
I loved the video that went around where it was like, let it go, and it's like the goat cuts in.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, you probably are enjoying too, as a parent, that's another thing that you get to do, is you get to really enjoy these kind of kid movies that you wouldn't be paying any attention to otherwise. It's quite a shift to go. For me, I went from single to family of 5 all at once, because my wife at the time, she had 2 daughters, so it was a great experience for me to just like go into the family world, which I love. Like to me, family is super important.
Yeah.
But what a change in lifestyle all of a sudden too. Talk a little bit about that. So as going from, I don't know what your world was. I mean, I've seen YouTube videos of you as a younger man, young guy moving to Nashville or whatever. But the shift to what your schedule might have been when it's just you and records versus it's family and we still get to do this thing. What have you learned?
Yeah, that's a great way to bring us back to the process of Something More Than Love, because Leo was an infant. Trying to remember. So he was like very small, and we wrote that record together. Lera had tons of lyrics and some melodies and some chord progressions, but we went in the studio with those ideas and built the songs.
Yeah.
And it took 7 months.
And at this point, your studio is not in the house, but it's nearby.
It's nearby, yeah, less than 10 minutes away. And that taught us, with Leo being, around, that time management is so much more important. You just get things done more quickly.
Yeah.
You decide, I have to get this done now. And that's the also another really interesting thing about the creative process, is that if you give yourself an hour to do a thing, a guitar part, write a verse, write a song, or if you give yourself 15 minutes to do that thing, there's no way that you can say that one is going to be better than the other. You might get a better verse in 15 minutes. You might get a better guitar part knowing that you only have a limited amount of time. And I will say that
you probably need more than 3.5 minutes, though. If it's a 3.5 minute song, that's my only. That'd be my only takeaway. Right?
You might, yeah. Unless you just play it fast and then slow it down.
Right.
You can do it in 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And then you're better if you can play it faster. Anyway, but
that's how you get a sloshier groove.
Yeah, right. Just play it double time.
If you want a tighter groove, you play it slower and speed it up.
Yeah. Speaking of, they got the tape machine. Got the tape machine rocking at the studio.
Oh, you got a tape machine? Oh, right. Because I helped you move it in.
Moved.
That's right. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great. Tell us about your tape machine. Talk about that stuff. Talk about analog. Talk about what was it like to get your first tape machine, and what things did you have to learn, and what are the challenges?
I'm learning from the beginning. Basically, I had a Tascam 4-track cassette tape machine when I was 17, and that was my last real experience with tape. So I don't know anything about it. So basically just having people come in and service it and tell me stuff. And then people like Lewis, who tape opped, the last Neil Young record, he knows everything about doing that. So he's been really helpful. I'll still be like, why isn't it working? Oh, I just didn't put the tape on right. Like, I'm that bad at it. So I'm just now learning, but I will say, I love the sound of it and I love printing things through it. We've made it super simple for me to send things to it, to record to it. And
Okay, so again, let's preface this. Getting your first tape machine in 2023, I think that should be a takeaway, Rockstars, is realizing like, you can, sure, it's an older tech, but you can just get started now if you want to. So in your case, you find a great tape machine. You happen to be in a city where there's support for that format, right? That probably helps.
And this specific machine, which is so crazy, this Mara company that takes these MCI JH110s, this exact model of tape machine, and refurbishes them, is here in town. So it's like, okay, so there's definitely people who can help me.
Yeah.
Keep it working.
And then the alignment process, for me, it was like aligning before every session and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't have to be, right? You can actually have a machine that's in pretty good shape and you can just get it aligned and it holds that alignment for a while, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
you're
any
able
questions you're asking me, I really don't have good answers for.
No, these are good answers because I think the takeaway is knowing that you can get something, get it set up and running, and then as a creative, you can just turn it on and use it. And you don't have to feel like a technician in order to own one, is what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I use it, I'll print tracks through it, and it's crazy what it does to acoustic guitar. I mean, it's crazy what it does to drums. But yeah, I mean, I'm learning the machine.
Talk about your process of using it. Do you have some kind of crazy fancy synchronizer thing, or do you just record something onto the tape and then
move it visually so the wavelength is exactly the same spot as the unprinted?
Okay, so then you are listening to your Pro Tools session, but you're recording what you're doing now onto the tape.
Yeah.
And then you rewind the tape and play it in and then just line it up or something?
Yeah, so like you can do it that way. So you can print it onto tape and then play it back, and the repro adjust the repro on the way back in, or you can do it all at one time and be monitoring the repro head when you're recording it in
real time. Yeah, with a delay.
Yeah, with a delay.
That's what I used to get into here.
Just not even use the tape head and just use the preamp. I mean,
just the input modules.
They sound so good.
Yeah.
I mean, I recorded the PM1000 into the MCI for bass the other day, and that was like noticeably good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, there was I remember when Kyle Lenning was in here, he was pointing out that there was a guy who had taken tape machines and he turned them into digital converters. So Kyle said that there was this guy who had taken MCI tape machines and turned them into digital conversion, where it actually swapped out the tape head with like these digital converter inputs.
Nice.
And I was like, wow, I never found one, but what a cool idea to have a full tape machine and that's all the analog in and out of your digital converters. Yeah. And then the converter just goes to your Pro Tools or something like that, and that becomes your sound.
Yeah.
I think that would be cool to do. And again, I like to say this on the show, but I'm reminded that like a lot of the important side of sound capture is the analog side. It's like the line
performance and the microphone
preamps and the mic preamps and stuff like that. And that's just been figured out for a long time. It's like this fancier digital side of how do we get it into computers and what do computers look like these days that keeps changing on us.
And I honestly, I use both. I'll record with my mics, my acoustic guitar. I use console. I use a compressor inside console. I sometimes use an EQ inside console.
When you say inside console, you're talking about your PCM, your PM1000, or are you talking about?
in the UA.
Oh, so let's go there. So that's what I wanted to ask you about too. When you were thinking about getting the Yamaha, prior to that, your experience was you've got a universal audio interface. You record straight into the computer. That's the sound you're familiar with.
Well, actually, I got the Apollo hardware because I knew I would need more A to D conversion. So the PM1000 coming into the picture was sort of at the same time that I also got the Apollo, and I have Apollo 16 and Apollo 8.
Okay.
And so yeah, console sort of like fell in line at that point.
I finally just got my first universal audio plugins.
Really?
Yeah, I just bought the native pack the other day.
So like now that you can do that, you don't have to have.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I installed it. I haven't even opened a session and opened one of them yet, but I'm really excited about it.
I like them. I mean, I'll use ProQ all day and use all those plugins.
Yeah, Fab Filter
stuff. And but yeah, you get what I like about the universal audio stuff, like, and it's not like I've used a different RE201, plugin, but it feels like you can get more accidents can happen when you're just
in the computer.
Yeah, like messing with knobs. Like I don't know, because of the way it's interfaced and because of the way it's like modeled after, the real thing in such a true way.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I haven't had a Roland Space Echo. I've never owned one, but I haven't even used one in the studio in years.
Yeah. I would love to have one.
Now that I have the plug-in version of it, I'm going to mess it all up, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. What else? Let's keep talking about records with Lera too. Talk more about the writing process. So let's talk about writing in general. What are some more important takeaways for the two of you writing together? Are you co-writing as well?
We co-wrote a lot of the record. Yeah.
What does that mean? What are things that really help in terms of process and what things for you are part of your writing process? Is it a daily routine? It's
not a daily routine, but the more you make it a daily routine, the easier it is. Like I was saying, like the creative process, it just thrives on routine. But our writing process was better because we were able to have a theme going in. The record was not so loosely based on becoming a mother and that process. And
themes help.
Themes help so much because they give you guidelines and they give you sort of like bumpers.
Even in us writing a song, it's just like picking something to write about in this song helps, right?
Right. So we had that as a starter. And she actually like wrote out a diagram of like the different things she wanted to write about. And, with different sort of like titles.
Is there a song about Binkies or like anything like that?
We didn't get that technical.
It's not quite that granular.
Yeah. Like there's more symbolism.
But also to reinforce what you said earlier about the schedule thing, that was my big takeaway about parenting is I saw my life go from you wake up in the morning, you go to the studio, you take a break at dinner, you go back to the studio until you can't keep your eyes open.
Yeah.
And you do that 7 days a week. That used to be my life.
Yeah.
With a little exercise in there once I started to need it.
Yeah.
But then, then it became family. It's like, oh, wait, I can't work at 8. I have to be, I have to stop because it's family time and dinner. And then I was like, what? And then going through a divorce too, then it became split schedules and stuff. And all of a sudden I'm on all the time. And I was like, wait a minute, how am I supposed to do all the things I need to do in like 3 days a week or whatever? And remarkably, I found that the need to dial in that time schedule causes it to happen. And I was like, I was like, wow, you can actually be more productive on less time.
Like we were saying,
It's bizarre.
you don't need as much time. And sometimes having too much time will make you less productive because you have more time to second guess everything.
You have to think about what should I do first.
yeah, exactly. Making lists help.
All right. So the writing process. So you guys are, thematically in on a record, thematically in a song.
Yeah, thematically on the record. And then we get in the room and she has a lyric. And I just like would basically throw up some kind of like sound. Maybe it's a drum loop. Maybe I'm just messing with like a synth pedal for my electric guitar, trying to push into a certain place.
When you say she has a lyric, or anybody you're co-writing with has a lyric, that might be a line or something like that.
Yeah, a chorus line.
Do you think that usually the chorus line has the harmony underneath it yet? In other words, does it know what chords are
sometimes
supposed to be?
Yeah, and that's a lot of where I come in, like with the ability to write a chord melody and to make something interesting. That's my strength. I love writing lyrics also. But that's where I'll sort of like say, oh yeah, it would be really interesting. And for Something More Than Love, the verse, I was like, just sing this melody you have in mind. And then I put chords underneath it. And if you listen to the verse of that song, it's like odd bars because there was no beat in her mind happening. And we built the chords around that.
Nice.
And it ended up being really interesting and creating a really interesting pre-chorus sort of like place. And
if you are mixing music, podcasts, or audio for video and you want it to sound amazing, then iZotope has got your back. With RX, Ozone, Neoverb, Nectar, and Vocal Synth, you'll have a collection of powerful apps and plugins that will help you get a professional sound in no time. Whether you're looking to clean up your vocal recordings with RX, master your tracks with Ozone, or add depth and ambience to your mixes with Neoverb, iZotope is your magic wand for awesomeness. Plus, with Nectar and Vocal Synth, you can easily add creative effects and unique textures to your vocals and instruments. From subtle mix enhancements to extreme sound design, iZotope takes your music and podcast productions to the next level. Go to iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Do you sometimes record the voice and then just give yourself this like no pressure zone to try different chords underneath it? Or do you find that it's helpful to play the chords while the singer's singing? I mean, I found myself sometimes, so when I'm doing that with my buddy Chris, for example, it's so easy for him to respond and go in a whole new direction. And so sometimes that can be great, but other times it can be challenging. I'm like, no, wait, go back to where you were. Or you don't have to.
Right.
Like, just because I played this chord doesn't mean you need to do that new thing. You know?
Right.
What are some things about smart ways to like explore melody and explore those chords with people?
Yeah. I mean, because I record so much music, we're always in this place as the session musician of like, one of our only tools can be that we're allowed to use in the studio is sometimes like changing a chord here or there. Right. So there's that idea where like, okay, chord substitutions. I can, up to a certain level of jazz, I can hear a lot of different chord substitutions and how they might work. And I've used every trick. So it's like knowing when to use something that might be cliche or,
How many versions of a C chord are there on a guitar?
I have no idea.
A lot or just two?
Well, a C chord's a C chord. But so.
Like there's more, I think that exploring that world where you got like the open chord, but then you're like, I guess you probably, sometimes a bar chord. In rock, the bar chord is really valuable. Yeah. If you want the chime and the open strings, that changes. What about drop tuning? I mean, there's, that's another thing for you. Let me see where it was. I don't remember where the question was, but I wrote one of the questions down about, I think it was actually on Lera's record. Dark Horse.
Yeah.
Dark Horse sounds like a drop tune.
Yeah, the acoustic version of that we did, I definitely tuned down.
Yeah. How valuable is exploring the tunings, and do you ever just make up tunings and not even know what the hell they are?
I do. I constantly do that. And I take that as like a nod to Joni Mitchell, who's a big influence on me. She doesn't know the tuning she's in. She's just, messes around until she likes the sound and then moves the bass note, does bar chords and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just another way to unlock the acoustic, strengths of an acoustic guitar.
Yeah. I found myself doing things like, well, first of all, discovering the capo is so great. I mean,
yeah,
that's an early lesson in the studio. It's like you learn these basic chord shapes.
Yeah.
And that's what the chords are. And you're like, we want more guitars on this. And I think the first move is like, okay, we'll just do the same thing on another guitar. And then you're like, that's not quite doing it,
Yeah.
And then you learn, what if we move the guitar voicing up the neck to a new location?
Right.
And then, and then you see somebody in the studio just puts a capo on and it's way up high and they're playing this other part. And it's like, oh, whoa, that's cool.
Yeah, that's a great trick. Just putting a capo on and playing it in a different position. Another thing that I've been doing recently is, because now I sort of like know the notes of each key relatively, I'm maybe not as good in A flat or D flat,
right.
But like in the key of A major, for example, like the C sharp is the third. So, why not just take the high E string and tune it down to C sharp and then play it out of the key of A? You're going to get some interesting sounds here. You're going to get that third on top, stuff like that. Or like, what relationship is this note that I've tuned to the key that I'm playing in, the key center that I'm living in with the chords below it?
Yeah.
That can create a really interesting sound.
Yeah. And another thing I love about capoing up the neck is now some of the fingerpick stuff you do, the notes that you're wanting to hear that are part of the kind of chord melody, the arpeggio or whatever the sound is, bing, 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 that you need to hear. They become very sustainy, because if you've got the right tunings, or like you said, you just like, or this one's a whole step off from where you wish it would be. You're just like, what happens if I just tune that string down another whole step?
That's,
some of your changes can be challenging on other chords, but depending on what you're doing, it can really sound cool.
Yeah. At one time in my life, I was in a session where we brought in an upright bass player to play on this song, and it was in D flat or A flat.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to tune down the bass. And I knew right then, I was like, there's almost no chance that this is going to be good, because it's not a jazz song. First of all, it's like, this is like a sort of a rootsy song, and it's reliant on the solidness of your note, the intonation of your note. It's not moving quickly. And he was sort of a stickler about like playing in D flat. And
right, because he wanted it. Probably it was an ego thing too.
Probably, yeah.
But I mean, like the good point for that, when you say it was a rootsy song, rootsy just makes me think rural. It makes me think, out in the countryside or whatever too. And honestly, it's like, I think a big part of the voicings and the guitar parts that work on songs is learning how to dumb shit down. Like if this can't be stupid simple, then it's probably not the right way to play it.
Right.
And I find myself stuck on guitar parts too, or you do some voicing and it starts to get difficult. And I'm like, I can beat myself up and say I should be better at this finger stretch.
Yeah.
Or I can accept that this is just the wrong way to be playing the song right there. It needs to be dumb, simple. Otherwise, because I think that as a listener too, I think you hear it. You hear it, right? You hear, does this sound so simple that I can grasp it, or does it sound like it's like advanced, and I need my listening to be advanced too to follow along.
It should feel easy when you hear it, and it shouldn't distract you in that way. And it often does because it's not easy to perform. So you notice that it doesn't feel as easy, and that changes things. I all the time, I'll get sent tracks and like, just replay this part, but better.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll have to sort of think like, how are they playing that? Because it's like, it seems like they probably picked the easiest way to play it, most likely. And now I just have to figure that out too.
Well, so let's talk about guitar voicings for a sec. So if you think about an open E chord,
yeah,
and Rockstars, if you're not familiar with the caged system, that's kind of these are good things to discover as you're like discovering the guitar, you know, C, A, G, E, D, different voicings to play the same chord. Start with an E chord down open. That has a certain quality to it, and there's a certain way you might pick it, and it's great for blues stuff.
Yeah.
But if you put a capo on the guitar and you move it up to a C shape on whatever that is, 7th fret or something like that, that is a totally different kind of chimey version of that chord. It's the same chord.
Yeah.
But it'll open up a world of what you can do with finger picks and how you can, you know, voice out the chords and let the notes ring. It's totally different.
Yeah. I mean, the acoustic guitar is so interesting. And when you get into the science of recording guitar and how acoustic guitar, if you just play an open E chord, you're basically occupying the entire frequency range. There's so much low information, there's so much mid-range information, there's so much high information.
Especially when the first thing you do is you go like, well, there's 6 strings. I'm supposed to play all 6 at once on every chord.
Oh yeah, and that's another thing. Like Brian Sutton, one of the great acoustic session players of all time, he'll be like, you don't need to hit all 6 strings. Just play 3 strings for this part. You know, that's like one of the biggest mistakes is that you think you have to play over this entire range. And that's when arranging is so important as a session musician. It's like you want to make sure that you're not getting in the way of everyone else. And if you think of that, playing that E chord down at the bottom, depending on the track, because sometimes you just want to do a big strummy E chord and then they'll just EQ it so it'll work. But if you're playing an E major chord, you're hitting that G sharp note on the G string, that first fret. That's a big fat major third. And lots of producers in country music, for example, will say like, man, you can't have those thirds. Those thirds take up so much space. The relationship of that 1 note to that 3 note, it's like you're taking up all the room when you do that.
Wow. I didn't know that. So that's, I mean, I might instinctively hear something like that, but it's cool to hear it described. So
yeah, or then you think of like AC/DC, and they're playing those chords, bar chords, with these full major chords, but it's like 3 guys, so they can do that, and it works,
right?
You know.
So interesting. So in the country stuff, because there's so many layers going on, and because the third is needed for the vocal harmonies, maybe, and
most of the time, yeah, it's in the vocal.
So a lot of times it's like, let's look for chord voicings that ring out, but sort of tuck the third away.
Don't have the third in
Just
them.
Don't
basically,
have the
third ones, 5s, 4s, 2s.
But which is okay. Fascinating. Yeah. All right, cool, man. See, we're learning something here.
Yep, that's country music, acoustic and electric guitar tracking 101. You just, lots of times you have to leave those notes out.
Just don't play
because there's just so much. They're so dense. The tracks are so dense now.
Yeah.
You know, and once you do it for a while, you sort of realize like where you fit. And that's why they call the high string guitar the Nashville tuning, because it's like you're out of the range of everything else. You're above everything else.
Yeah.
At that point, even if you're playing an E chord.
Tell us what what that tuning is.
It is the same tuning, but the first 4 strings, E, A, D, and G, are an octave higher. So it creates a really interesting sound because the G string is tuned higher than the B string. It's above the B. So it's fun to play that way, and also a really interesting sort of...
Do you use a lot of the same voicings you would normally use on the fingerings, or do you actually...
Yeah, you do. Like the sound of a C chord sounds totally different. I love the sound of playing out of a C shape with the high string guitar because of the way the octaves relate.
And initially, it was if you think about a 12-string guitar, Rockstars, there's 12 strings on it. There's the regular 6 strings of a guitar, and then there's the like Todd just said, there's the octave up for E, A, D, and G.
Right.
And then the B and the E strings
Are
on the top
unison.
are actually just unison.
Right.
And a high string guitar is just removing all the 6 strings,
Right.
just leaving the high ones only.
Yeah.
So it's a great way. It's a great additional sound to have for studio stuff. It really lends something cool. It's our guitar version of having a harpsichord available to us on a session. That's the way I like to think of it, because it gives that same kind of really high chimey sound on an overdub.
Yeah.
And it's also a great way to rescue an acoustic that's no good anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool. Like you can record 12 string or you can record 6 string and then double it with high string.
Yeah. So if you've got an old acoustic that the action's starting to get a little wacky on, you can just put a high string because it's lighter
it's
strings.
the throwaway guitar.
Yeah.
Can sometimes become that.
Although if you want to go up the neck, you're still screwed because the intonation's probably way off. Talk a little bit about that. So what about guitars and making sure they're really playable and stuff like that? What lessons have you learned? What are some of the acoustic guitars that you really find useful for playing with your style and all this stuff?
I'll describe some of my instruments and how I use them. My main guitar on sessions is a 1949 Gibson J45. That is just super even and not too bassy and just really great action. Intonates pretty well. It's had its little moments.
Is that a big guitar, like a hummingbird body shape, or
it's like I think it's actually slightly smaller than a dreadnought, but similar. J45 I think is a tiny bit smaller than a J50.
What my mahogany guild there, is that about the dreadnought?
That's about dreadnought size. Yeah. The J45 is my go-to usually, and then I have a few others. I have a little guild that I like for finger picking. That's a little 62 F20.
Do you feel like that's a fair question to ask you or any guitarist? Like, what's a great all-around guitar for the Rockstars to consider if they're like, I just need a really good acoustic that's going to kind of work for lots of different things?
Yeah.
Or are guitars just so personal that you can't really ask that question?
There are guitars that work well for a lot of things.
Like that J45 is great for strumming, but also great for finger picking.
Yeah, it is. But it's not
if
the
you're
best thing for finger
flat-picking
picking.
Bluegrass and need to be loud enough.
Yeah, that would work too. Every guitar has a little different flavor and a little. It has one thing that it's greatest at. Every style. But yeah, there are some really great guitars that are not that expensive now that are sort of better catch-alls for everything.
Yeah. Any unexpected guitar companies that you've discovered that worth giving a shout out to, that the Rockstars should know about? Or
I mean, I just haven't.
People are making new
I'm
guitars.
just looking for old guitars now.
You are, yeah.
I'm not really like trying out any new stuff, but Rockbridge comes to mind. They make pretty great guitars. Besides that, I'm not really sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Martin makes some pretty inexpensive instruments now that are pretty great.
Yeah, I've got the Martin Backpacker guitar, and I just love that thing.
That's a great little guitar.
Tiny.
Yeah, they make some really inexpensive guitars. Like I have a Martin 12 string that was $500 that I use.
Let me ask you that question. So you're familiar with the Backpacker guitar and the kind of tone that comes out of that. I find it can be really helpful and useful for songwriting, sketching, playing out and about. But do you sometimes find that the guitar, the easy guitar that you had that you wrote with, can also like bite you in the ass later in the studio where you're like, oh, I need to rethink this part on a proper guitar or anything like that?
Well, for me at this point, I'm usually writing on a guitar that I like, and the song sort of like builds around the guitar that I'm using, and I sort of have that in mind. But there's definitely situations where you'll hear like a work tape. And I think more than not, though, the guitar on the work tape sort of informed the song.
Yeah.
So like if it's a big strummer, they're probably strumming a big guitar.
Yeah. So what's a work tape for the Rockstars?
Oh, work tape is
kind of a Nashville thing, right?
Yeah, I guess it's a Nashville thing. It's like It's like a recording of the song before you record the song. It's what you
it's a demo that's not a full band, right?
Yeah, it's a demo that you made on your iPhone. Or it's not a demo. It's just you singing and playing the song.
Yeah. OWC is your one-stop shop for flexible drive storage and connectivity solutions for your studio. The Mini Stack STX for your Mac Mini adds 2 additional drives over a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and an NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD, plus 3 additional Thunderbolt USB-C ports. The OWC Thunder Bay 4 chassis, built like a tank, gives you 4 hot-swappable 2.5-inch RAID configurable drive bays, plus an extra Thunderbolt 3 jack for daisy chaining up to 5 devices. Or check out the OWC Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock with 2 RAID configurable drives and 7 ports of connectivity, including a front-side SD card reader, 1 gig Ethernet, 2 USB 3.2 ports, a dedicated display port, and an additional backward-compatible Thunderbolt port. Get your studio connected with the Mini Stack STX, Thunder Bay 4, and Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars. Use the custom link in our show notes because it's a great way for you to help support this podcast. So thanks, Rockstars. Good. I'm glad you went there because that is a question we really haven't covered yet, which is, and one of the examples was Donovan Wood's record you guys did. Vocal and guitar recorded together versus one than the other.
Yeah.
When and how should we think about setting up for a session in terms of that kind of question? Do you find yourself on sessions sometimes where you're thinking we should be ready for vocal and guitar because we might use it? Or do you ever have somebody comes in, can we set up so we get a great vocal sound just in case we like it?
I think all those things happen. Yeah. And having that versatility is great to be able to isolate a vocal and have it on a good vocal chain while you're tracking your guitar. Because honestly, like there is definitely something that happens when people track together.
Yeah.
Certain, like Brian Eno, I don't know what record, it was one that maybe he was doing with Daniel Lanois, where he said, on this record, 2 people always have to be recording. Nobody gets to record by themselves.
That's great.
So it's always playing. You're always playing with the other person. And if you think, why? Well, that's a great idea. Because something does happen when you're not just listening to yourself. You're not just trying to execute this thing, which will just ruin it. It'll ruin all the pure, like any energy in it. And you're getting to listen and interact, which that's what listening to music is. You're listening to it. You're interacting with, in that way. And to be able
conversation.
It's a conversation. And to be also be able to record that.
Yeah, I heard about Nigel Godrich doing that with Back on Sea Changes as well, because I had met, I think it was Peter, the guitar player, was telling me that out in LA, and I was like, oh, that's such a cool idea.
And it might have been them. It might not have been Eno.
It's a cool idea.
It's probably Godrich.
It's a cool idea, though.
Yeah.
And like, it's, I love the most playing with a full band in the studio. There's just something about that to me feels like
it's so fun.
You're on a club team together and you're just all trying to score a goal.
Yeah, I'm that guy. I'm a team player. I love the feeling of adding to something with other people and the camaraderie of that and the magic of that. That's why I love doing sessions. A lot of time we're recording a very similar style of song, but there's definitely fun in just getting to play together. And when you said, what about jamming? That's the kind of jamming I get to do.
Yeah.
That's when I'm doing that. I don't do it at all any other way. I don't have I do play a gig where I get to improvise once a month, once every other month with Victor Krause at
nice.
Rudy's.
Victor's great.
He's incredible. Huge mentor. Love Victor and his writing.
And Rudy's is our super badass jazz club here in Nashville. It's like Smalls in New York. It's our basement. Right on. So what have we not? I know what I want to ask you about. What about guitar pedals? What kind of stuff are you excited about? Do you explore? Obviously, that doesn't count for acoustic unless it does, and there's something I don't know about. But in the electric world, Do you really enjoy exploring that world of ambient guitars and cool pedals and effects and things like that?
Yeah, I have a Big Sky that's in line on my Mellotron and my GX8P synthesizers.
So you have the Melodyne digital
Mellotron.
Mellotron.
Yeah.
Mellotron. Sorry, what did I say? Melodyne?
Yeah.
Mellotron, the digital.
I have an actual
version.
Mellotron. I have
With the physical tape in it?
No, I have a new one that
Right.
has recordings in it. Yeah, that's what you mean.
Great.
Yeah, so I don't have an old one. That would be nice.
How do you enjoy that?
I love it. I mean, it's wooden keys. It's aftertouch, so you can push in and get more volume.
Cool.
And it's also, I can use it as my MIDI controller. And I love the weirdness of that. I love how like things are all the sounds are wrong. So you get a texture and a depth that you wouldn't get. And then like incorporating this Big Sky digital reverb into that is it's a great way in for sounds.
What's the Big Sky digital reverb?
It's a
pedal that just
Big
does
Sky.
super
Yeah,
reverb.
what is that?
Strymon.
So like Strymon is like I'm basically a poster boy for Strymon. I have so many of their pedals, and I think they're all great. I think like most recently I've been using the Iridium, which is their amp modeler, which like we went on tour in Europe and I brought the Iridium and just went straight into the consoles.
I think we just used that on a session here.
It's so versatile. And
Hunter Cross brought in, we did guitars and all, they were both just little pedal amp modelers. And
it's
I was like,
really
all
great.
right.
It's really great.
I love that shit because when I'm doing a session, if I was sticking to my, Lidge knows what's best or something like that, I might have been like, no, you can't use an amp modeler,
Yeah.
But I like doing sessions where somebody comes in and they want to do it because then I'm like, oh, cool, I can find out if these actually sound good. And then they did sound great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a $300 pedal. Yeah, I like the Iridium.
What are the challenges about playing a show, though, if you bring a pedal amp modeler?
Well, I just weighed the challenge of like being somewhere in Germany and then backlining an amp with being able to bring this sound that I know what it sounds like, just level out my monitor. If you can give me a monitor mix behind me. So I haven't.
Okay, so it feels like an
just
amp behind
the amp.
you too.
And that after the second show, I was like, this is great.
Do you feel like stages are starting to evolve to accept this kind of thing?
Yeah, people are, like the sound men and the versatility of digital consoles at venues is just getting better. And they're like, yeah, of course, we have 4 mixes or whatever. And usually they do. So if you're traveling as a duo, you can usually get 2 vocal mixes up front and 2 guitar mixes behind you. And it ended up being way better.
All right, so let me hit you with this question here on our way out. I got a few. We'll kind of fire them off quick if you want. So it's sort of our original jam session here. Questions.
Okay.
So when you started out in recording or in music here in Nashville, what do you feel like was holding you back?
Just my lack of knowledge of everything that goes into it. I mean, you slowly get better at arranging yourself. You get better at recording yourself. You get better gear. You get better at actually playing music. That was what was holding me back.
You just got to be willing to put in the time.
Yeah, and you have to be like lucky enough to like get opportunities to record like, guitar vocal demos for people that will pay your rent.
Yeah.
They
don't all have to be #1 records.
No, I play on thousands of bad songs.
Nice. But nobody that we know.
Nobody that we know. They've all written better songs since then.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And
speaking of which, I mentioned it in the beginning, but we didn't give a shout out to Mickey Cash.
Yeah.
Thinking of cool songs and a cool person to work with. She's down in St. Augustine, I think, which is where you said you were from.
Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. I love St. Augustine. All right. So now how about some of the best advice you received on the show? I mean, during
my, what is some of the best advice?
Or anybody that was sort of a mentor for you, anybody who gave you some really good advice at the beginning. I guess when Henry invited you to come to Nashville, you probably had some good advice. Just get up here and get started.
Just get started. Yeah. These questions about like advice I've been given, I feel like every day I'm learning new things and slowly getting better. But what I've learned from all of my experiences, I would say, with recording and guitar, just making sure that what you're putting in front of the mic sounds good or sounds the way you want it to sound. Don't rely on what the computer will do. And then my brain says the backside of that, or just manipulate things in the computer until you like them. There's no one way of doing things, but don't waste money on preamps, or microphones. Just play your guitar and work on your guitar,
Yeah, I like to say there's a far greater variety of sounds you can make come out of a guitar with your fingers than variety of microphones you can get to create different sounds.
And that brings me to some great advice would be play dynamically and really be conscious of the dynamics you're creating, because when you're playing your instrument and you're hitting a guitar string, you're creating a volume dynamic that translates into the speaker as a volume dynamic. And all it really is frequencies and volume. So that's all that this whole thing is, how loud you're hitting a note and what frequency that note is. And that's what mixing is. And that's what performing is.
That's what guitar voicings are.
Yeah. It's you're in different frequency ranges and how hard you're hitting them. And my whole style is based on playing gently.
Yeah.
And then just adding more when you need it.
What about that? What are some of the ways that you play super gentle? So like Dreamwaves, even Serenity's got this really light touch and a lot of harmonic kind of stuff we hear on the guitars.
Yeah.
How do we get that kind of sound? Are you playing with picks, playing with fingers?
Mostly playing with fingers. The golden hour sound is a thumb strum that I'll use my thumb a lot of the time. The pick, especially, when you're using a plastic pick, will add an extra amount of transient amount and an extra dynamic range that you don't get when you're just using the skin on your thumb. It's
Do
much
we run
softer.
the risk of having an overly dark guitar when we're learning how to strum with our thumb?
Yeah, absolutely. But that's another thing, the power of recording now. You can boost the mid-range and boost the high end in a way that isn't harsh if what you're giving, there's so much more tonal shaping that's available now that you don't have to worry so much about playing a really light acoustic guitar that's kind of dark, because to take us right back to what we said in the beginning, the mixing technology is just so much better now.
Do you find that KM84, that small diaphragm condenser, becomes really valuable when you're doing the light strum and trying to get it to work in the mix?
Yeah, it's important to have a microphone that's going to pick up enough high end.
Yeah, isn't it? Is it a game of opposites a little bit? If the thumb strum is sort of dark, then the brighter mic lifts it, and if the pick strum is aggressive, then the Coles tames it.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Do you ever feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take you years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. Quote, "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process that I've ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, but condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session, close quote. Look, I'm so confident that this will take your mixes to the next level that if you can't get a killer mix within 30 days, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the ultimate snare mixing trick. And I'll see you at the front row table of the Grammys. Cheers. Tom Bukovac, there was a video of you guys chatting on YouTube. Anything you enjoyed or learned from Tom working with him in the studio? Who is Tom?
Tom Bukovac is just one of the greatest guitar players I've ever met. And he is such a team player, and he's so good at making everybody feel comfortable. And he always elevates like what everyone is doing in this subtle way. Like he's so good at the dynamic of recording in the room dynamic and how we're interacting. And one of the best. He told me tune your guitar in fifths. That helps you tune your guitar.
Interesting. So like instead of thinking about the E and then the octave on the D string and tuning those first, you're tuning the E and a
B note on the A string. Yeah.
Getting those together.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, fifths present some remarkable challenges when you get into rock and distortion stuff. Like I just never thought that playing a power chord and getting it to sound in tune through a overdriven tube amp could present so many challenges. Oh, here comes the espresso machine shutting down again on us loudly in the background. I don't think actually that's ever made it onto the mics on the podcast. I think it always gets cut off, but it sounds so loud to us. Okay, cool. So how about a recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something that the Rockstars could use on their next session? Anything that you didn't mention yet?
Okay, yeah. Acoustic guitar, take out 110 hertz, a little bit of 110 hertz, maybe a couple decibels, and a little bit of 220 hertz, and high pass at like 80. And you're still going to get low end information, but all that blow up stuff that happens in the low end will be tamed. It took me so long to like realize that you EQing visually and EQing with your EQ on your preamp, you're still hearing the frequencies that are being quote unquote taken out, but they're tamed.
Right. A lot of times we think about a low cut and we're like, well, you don't want to get rid of everything. Yeah. But when you look at the actual frequency spectrum, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Not only is it not getting rid of everything in that lower range, but it's actually only knocking it down so many dB.
Right.
You know? It's only just turning it down a little bit.
Right. And then also like being where you put yourself. I like to be sort of like at the 12th fret at a little bit of an angle and probably about 8 inches away.
That's for the mic placement.
For the mic. Yeah. Like if you're finger picking or you're thumb strumming and you're playing really softly, you might be a little bit closer. If you want to have a little bit more roomy sound, it's going to sound a little cooler if you're a little further away. Just being conscious of that. And
a good reminder too is just like get that double mic placement going and just leave it where it is. Just move your body around.
Right.
Just scoot your seat back a little, scoot it forward.
Right.
It's amazing how much difference you get when you just pivot in your stool for the guitar part. And then, but one challenge though too is remembering to, visually mark where the hell were you playing that? So if you got to do, 4 takes and comp them together or like punch something in.
Right. I know. I'm actually really good at not moving and making any noise when I play. But then the other side of that is like remembering to breathe.
Right.
Because anybody who's getting into recording, especially acoustic guitar, it can be a stressful situation being on the floor with people. You have to remember to breathe. And that's like, you have to remember to keep your legs loose. I mean, talk about advice, like be conscious of the tension in your body while you're recording.
Yeah.
Like if you are not relaxed, it's not going to sound relaxed and you're going to be in pain at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. It is painful. Playing music can be really painful. Hunching over acoustics.
Yeah.
My brother was talking about a famous jazz musician he knows that is so advanced with his practice now that when he practices, he will just play one open E note for 45 minutes and just practice just playing the single note or something like that.
Absolutely.
Get one with the sound.
Yeah. Yeah. Simplify. Just play something very
favorite
simple.
hardware tool or something you're excited about? What's something physical that's great to have for sessions and recording?
Oh, for sessions and recording. Well, I mean, I love the tape machine. It's the most exciting new thing. And then what it does is just this magic depth and space.
Had you explored plug-in versions and now you got the real thing?
I use both. I'll be using both.
But you hear a difference, you feel like, oh, I can tell.
Yeah, it's funny. Like when I first started using the tape machine, running stuff through it, I would like run 4 tracks through it and then like noise reduce the tracks. And then I could go back and just mute the ATR 102 on my master. And it almost sounded exactly the same. But now that I've been
like, wait a minute, why would I do all that effort to almost sound exactly the same?
Yeah, and you really don't. What you want to do is to be able to like push the input and the output and like really create, you really push into what the tape does, and you can't, it's still different.
If you haven't tried it yet, try some slide guitar where you just completely bury the needle on that.
Oh yeah,
tape machine.
That sounds fun.
All right, how about favorite software tool? Anything plugin wise or software that is that we should know about or that you're just excited about yourself?
I don't explore plugins that often. But yeah, like I have so many friends like Conrad, who's like always getting new plugins. Like he talks about how Plugin Alliance is just
we need to have
the best.
Conrad on this too.
You really do. He would be great. Right. Yeah, but like Plugin Alliance for people who are like wanting to try out plugins, you just pay like a subscription and you have a million different plugins to try.
They got a lot of great ones. And I will tell you 2 that really stand out to me recently on sessions are the B15 amp and the Ampeg SVT. Those are they sound so great.
Yeah.
They work as...
The UA ones really sound great too. I wonder how they compare. I use those all the time.
Probably all great. Everybody's great. It's all great. You got to play the right note anyway.
Yeah, right.
All right. How about a resource or tip for the business side of doing this? If the Rockstars want to make records and have it be more than a hobby, what tip would you give them?
Know your worth. Find out from other people that you respect and that are doing it, how much it costs to do it. And then base your price on how much experience you have compared to them. If you're just starting out, you can't charge what somebody who's been doing it 20 years charges. And most likely you're not good enough to do that. So get a basis for kind of like where you stand in the business. And that might mean doing some things for really cheap. And then the other side of that is like, if you're good at what you do, sometimes you will have to play stuff you don't like to make money. But that leaves room for you to play on stuff that you do like to make art.
Nice. And I guess a good takeaway too is everything that we do that isn't something we ultimately like, there's a lot of opportunity in there still. You just got to identify it. Like I like to say that working on styles of music that I was never interested in the first place can still be a great opportunity to hone my craft and my ability to like the craft of recording and mixing and getting sounds.
Absolutely. I told myself a couple of years ago that like, all right, every time I go into a recording session, I'm going to enjoy myself. And I'm going to come out of that session better at what I do than when I walked in. And if I'm not doing that, if I'm not enjoying myself, then I shouldn't be doing it, you know?
Yeah. And it's like if you're going to play acoustic and you're just playing chords or whatever, if you play the greatest sounding chords on a record that isn't going to get heard, you still got the chance to practice playing the greatest sounding chords.
Yeah. And you can go in there saying, I'm going to play this G chord really well. And really, like your friend said, he can play one note for 40 minutes. You can always play that chord better than you played it last time. You can always play that rhythm pass a little bit better.
One of the real challenges and tasks of being a session musician too is you're relied upon. Every time you play a G chord, it should sound really great.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do.
It is. I mean, acoustic guitar is so difficult. Recording is so difficult. And I feel like I'm being taught a lesson every time I sit down in front of a microphone, because it's a life's search to do it well.
Yeah.
And I feel great that I'm at a point now where I feel comfortable being there, but that doesn't mean I don't feel challenged.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last question. This one is hypothetical. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back and find young Todd, who's like, but I like playing on St. George Street or whatever. And you're going to say, listen, dude, one day you're going to want to be a rock star of the recording studio. And here's the single most important thing you need to know to get there. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could?
This really brings up a lot of advice people have given me. Now some is coming in. One friend said, keep writing. Never stop writing. That's the most important thing. Writing, figuring out how to record the songs you write, and owning your masters. Do that. And then one person said, just focus on, if you're going to be a session player, really focus on doing the one thing, either acoustic guitar and acoustic instruments, or electric guitar or bass. Don't try to do all of them. There's sort of two sides of that now, because like that guy's a great famous producer and he can play bass and electric guitar and acoustic guitar. And he did that on his records. Mm-hmm. But he also hired out to it. And maybe those guys were a little bit better because they specialized.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming and hanging with us, man. It's awesome, as always, to see you. And it was a long walk over here. But Rockstars, thank you for listening. Let the Rockstars know, where can they go learn more about you, learn more about the records you're making with Lera, all the music you're doing.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about Yana Mila, who's this artist that I'm working with now, but her record will probably be out by the time this comes out.
Oh, cool.
So
great. Well, we'll have that in the show notes too.
Yeah. I guess,
do you have all your stuff on your website usually?
Not really. I'm so bad about this. The thing is, right now I'm locked out of my Instagram account.
Oh, no. So Rockstars, don't you love to hear it? Like when the most famous people are just like going through the same bullshit that you're going through.
But like, what's crazy is like, by then I think I'll be able to, I can call in a favor and get back in. So there will be updates to my Instagram page, and that's probably like the closest, most relevant resource for what I'm doing. And there will be like behind the session Apple Music playlist that will be coming out soon.
Very cool.
Spotlighting what I'm doing. So on Apple, and you can hear my music, Tolo, Tolo.
Okay, great. That was you. I didn't realize that was you as I was listening to that. We didn't even talk about that. My question would have been like, those vocals sound super cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Double your vocal and, sing right when you wake up.
That's great, man. And if the Rockstars are like, man, we need the most amazing producer and guitar player to make our next hit record, where should they find you? ToddLombardo.com.
Yeah, lombardomusic@gmail.com. I'm just like, I sort of wince thinking about how many direct messages I've missed on Instagram if people have been trying to get in touch with me. Instagram
does seem to be a really good way for people to
it's really easy
and communicate.
But like you can get to me through toddlombardo.com or lombardomusic@gmail.com.
Groovy.
Yeah.
All right, dude. Well, thank you for coming over and hanging, man. We got to let you go. I know you got all kinds of things going on. So thanks for carving out time for us.
So fun.
Thanks for listening. And Todd, look forward to seeing you around the neighborhood, dude.
Yeah, man. Likewise.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible. OWC, Lewitt, Atom Audio, Isotope, and Spectra 1964. And remember, at isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the link in our show notes, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Braden Stremming, for additional podcasts and video production. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.